He was basically looked at as used goods coming into the NBA. 4 years at Wake Forest and an All-American selection as a senior had somehow hurt his draft stock. But once Josh Howard took the court in the NBA, it was clear that he was a steal for the Dallas Mavericks. An energy guy who never gave up on a play, Howard was relentless on the offensive glass, but could still put the ball on the floor and slash to the hoop. And on the other side of the court, he gave an offensive-oriented Mavs team a defensive stopper, helping them to an NBA Finals appearance and making an All-Star team. But some off-the-court incidents at the height of his career led to criticism for the misunderstood Mavs star. Then soon after that, injuries hit him hard and fast, causing him to miss more games than he played over the second half of his 10-year career. But every game he did play, he played with a chip on his shoulder. And when he was healthy, he could do whatever you needed. Let's jog your memory. As a toddler growing up in North Carolina, Josh Howard's family was just happy to see him run, as he suffered from severely bowed legs, which had to be broken and reset twice before the age of 2, but he kept running on the basketball court at Glenn High School, playing with hustle and urgency that could only come from someone who at one point couldn't run at all, putting up big numbers across the board and not needing much time to do so, leading to Howard's star growing quickly, with his senior year really putting him on the map, as he averaged about 26 points, 13 boards, and 6 blocks, while leading the Bobcats to a 3A championship and earning his second consecutive Frank Spencer Award as the top player in Northwest North Carolina. Yet his road to college basketball was obstructed by one thing, and that was the SAT, as with Howard needing a 950 to be eligible, he wouldn't even get close to that score, so he'd have to take a detour, attending Hargrave Military Academy in Virginia so that he could improve his academics while continuing to play basketball. And after attaining the necessary score on the SAT, the teenager who was being recruited by many top programs would commit to Wake Forest so he could return home and play in front of family and friends. Josh Howard joined a Wake Forest team who had been searching for their next star since the graduation of Tim Duncan a couple years earlier, and it looked like they may have found that in Howard, as the forward became one of the team's top contributors as a freshman, joining forces with guard Robert O'Kelly and big man Darius Sangaila. And while Howard wasn't quite a star in year 1, it seemed like it was only a matter of time.
Josh Howard, a good-looking young player, as a freshman, doesn't get a lot of notoriety, he didn't come in with a big-time reputation, but he is going to be one heck of an ACC player.
Wake Forest got off to a hot start, but faltered come conference play, which led to them finishing with a 16-13 regular season record. But they showed some fight in the conference tourney, first defeating North Carolina before losing a competitive game to a heavily favored Duke team, with Howard scoring a season-high 19 points. And while this wasn't enough to get the Deacons a bid to the NCAA tourney, they did get an NIT invite and would take care of business, making it all the way to the title game, where they would defeat Notre Dame to capture the championship, with Howard's freshman season ending with him averaging about 9 points, 4.5 rebounds, and 2 assists per game. Howard's role was greatly expanded in 2001. He had arrived at Wake Forest as a slasher, and that remained his preferred way of getting points as a sophomore. But now he was showcasing an improved three-point shot, which helped turn him into the team's leading scorer, while remaining one of their best rebounders. And with Howard also giving them 2 steals and a block per game, he was the true definition of a two-way player, even being recognized with a second-team all-conference selection. And after starting last year with 5 straight wins, they started this year a little better, winning their first 12, which included a rout of number 3 ranked Kansas. But conference play was again their kryptonite, overall finishing the season with a 19-11 record. And this year their conference tourney would be over a lot quicker after a quarterfinals loss to Maryland, but at least they'd be dancing, as they had received an at-large bid to the tourney and a first-round matchup with Butler. But foul trouble and poor shooting would limit Howard to just 4 points, as the Deacs went down quietly, and Howard finished the season with averages of about 13.5 points, 6 rebounds, and 2 assists per game. Prior to Howard's junior year, the Deacs made a coaching change, replacing Dave Odom with Skip Prosser, and under Prosser, Wake Forest became an offensive force, putting up the 7th most points in the nation. And while Howard's scoring stayed about the same, he would shoot over 50% for the only time in his college career. And a big reason for that was due to his rebounding, specifically his work on the offensive glass, as his 105 offensive rebounds would be the second most in the ACC, pulling down nearly 3.5 per game. And while Wake Forest didn't have the same hot start as last year, it was their conference play that was most notable, finishing with a winning record against ACC opponents for the first time since '97. Then they would knock off Georgia Tech in the ACC tournament, before falling to the defending national champion Duke Blue Devils in the semis. But for the second straight season, they were tournament bound. However, Howard wasn't 100%, as he had suffered a late season ankle sprain and would play just 18 minutes in their first round defeat of Pepperdine. But in round 2 versus Oregon, Howard could only manage 6 minutes and 2 points, as the Ducks edged out the Deacs, with Howard's junior season seeing him average about 14 points, 7.5 rebounds, and 2 assists per game. Then Howard looked like he'd still be hobbled going into his senior season due to complications from his ankle recovery. But as he'd soon show, a stress reaction wasn't going to slow him down. 10 straight wins for Wake Forest to begin the season showed that Howard was just fine, as the senior was being praised as one of the most complete players in the country, and would look like that all season, going on to be the ACC's top scorer and one of its best rebounders in '03. And he still wasn't taking plays off, aggressively attacking the offensive glass to lead the conference in that category as well. And on defense, Howard was their stopper, the guy they'd look to when they needed to contain the opposing team's star, as he would receive an ACC first team all-defense selection. And while they had a mediocre 2-2 start to conference play, they would then win 4 straight, and after a non-conference loss to Marquette, they ended the season by winning 7 of their final 8, with Howard notably scoring 17 second-half points in their final home game against UNC. And overall, their 13-3 record in conference play got them their first outright ACC regular season title in over 40 years, led by their consensus first-team All-American in Howard, who also was named ACC Player of the Year as the award's first unanimous winner since David Thompson in 1975. Yet after defeating Florida State in the conference tourney quarterfinals, they would again fall in the semis, this time to NC State. But the 24-5 Demon Deacons were again heading to the NCAA tournament, and a surprising first-round nail-biter would see Howard go for 12 points and 13 boards in a victory over East Tennessee State. But once again, the second round would be as far as they'd get, as while Howard had 14 points along with 4 steals and 3 blocks, he also had 7 turnovers, and a horrible shooting performance from Wake Forest led to them losing to Auburn, as Howard's senior season had ended with him averaging about 19.5 points, 8.5 rebounds, and 2 steals per game. So with all the hard work done for now, Howard hoped that he had done enough. But as he hadn't been invited to attend the NBA draft in person, there was definitely some concern. So Josh Howard was made the final pick of the first round in the now legendary 2003 NBA draft, which was surprising for a player with his resume, and who had taken such a noticeable leap as a senior. But in a time when players were still coming out of high school, including this year's first overall pick, it was felt that Howard's age and experience had actually hurt him, and it stung a little bit more, seeing as how he was reportedly projected as a possible lottery pick had he left school after his junior season. But a college degree was more important to Howard than a temporary game, and while no one had looked at him as a top pick, many were now seeing him as the steal of the draft. The Mavs already weren't known as a defensive team, and with 2 of their top perimeter defenders from last year in Raja Bell and Adrian Griffin set to enter free agency, Dallas was trying to do some damage control in bringing in Howard. But on the offensive end, they were set, with their trio of Dirk Nowitzki, Steve Nash, and Michael Finley, as well as 2 new acquisitions in Antoine Walker and Antoine Jamison. Yet even though they were deep at the forward position, Howard still found minutes, logging the most minutes off the bench outside of eventual 6th Man of the Year Jamison, with Howard doing what he was expected to do, be a tough defender and high-energy player on the second unit, as his minutes would reach their peak in the middle of the season, with him even having a stretch as a starter. But near the end of the year, an undrafted rookie named Marquise Daniels started playing incredibly, which would cut into Howard's minutes. But regardless, it was impressive seeing rookies get so much time on the court on a Don Nelson team, as the coach was notorious for not playing first-year players. And it looked like the Mavs had not found just 1, but 2 hidden gems, and Howard's overall rookie season would still be good enough for a second-team all-rookie selection. And with the Mavs boasting the league's top offense, they totaled 52 wins and got a first-round matchup with Sacramento. And after a solid game 1 from Howard, his shot completely disappeared, as over the next 4, he shot a combined 4 of 28 from the field, but was able to still get some minutes with his defense and hustle. Yet Howard wasn't the only no-show in the playoffs, with a lot of the Mavs' top players struggling, en route to a 5-game loss, as Howard's rookie season ended with him averaging about 8.5 points, 5.5 rebounds, and 1.5 assists per game. So while Daniels built on his strong end-of-season play with a great series against Sacramento, Howard knew he had to work to earn his spot. And while the points may have been lacking, he was someone who could impact the game in so many ways on both sides of the ball. And with the ability to play both wing positions and even some 4 in a small ball lineup, Dallas had no choice but to start him in year 2. But they were also a much different looking team, as star point guard Steve Nash was gone. However, the Mavs had flipped Walker and Jamison for a trio of players who would become very important to the team's success in Jason Terry, Jerry Stackhouse, and Devin Harris. So in his new starting role, Howard upped his numbers across the board, as after failing to score 20 points even once as a rookie, he hit that mark 13 times in year 2, even dropping a season-high 30 points in a mid-February win over Phoenix. And with 12 double-doubles, the rebounding was present as well. Then on the other side of the ball, Howard led the Mavs in steals. And while Dallas was still scoring at an incredible rate, with guys like Howard, Daniels, and the newly acquired Eric Dampier, they would actually roll out a respectable defense too, with Dallas trusting Howard to contain some of the league's top scorers, as the Mavs were among the best in the West throughout the season. But then with the team sitting at 42-22, Nelson stepped down from his head coaching position and would appoint assistant coach and Nelson's protege Avery Johnson. And under Johnson, the Mavs looked even better, losing just twice over their final 18 games to finish with a 58-24 record, as they looked like a legit championship contender going into a first-round matchup with Houston. Howard would have the tough task of containing Tracy McGrady, and while he put in good effort, McGrady was pretty close to unstoppable, averaging nearly 31 points. But Howard had his own moments on the offensive end, as over the first 6 games of the series, he recorded 17 points in 3 of them, yet would fail to crack double figures in the other 3. And foul trouble was really hindering him, as he fouled out of 3 of those games as well. But with the series on the line in Game 7, Howard played the best game of his young career, putting up 21 points and 11 boards, and adding 4 blocks, while also holding McGrady to 10 of 26 shooting on the other end, as Dallas routed Houston to advance to a second-round matchup with Phoenix. This series was even better for Howard, as he really broke out as an offensive threat, hitting double figures in every game and averaging nearly 18 points on 55% shooting for the series, while also pulling down over 8 boards a night, as he cleaned up a lot of his teammates' misses and recorded double-doubles in games 4 through 6, which included a playoff career-high 29-point and 10-rebound performance in a Game 4 win. But overall, Dallas would come up short, as they lost in 6, with Howard's season seeing him average about 12.5 points, 6.5 rebounds, and 1.5 assists per game. And after 2 really good years to start his career, Dallas looked like they had found something special. Dallas had decided to give Finley his walking papers, and were going forward with Josh Howard as a key piece of their core. And with an up-and-coming point guard in Devin Harris, some of their best players were also their youngest, so the future was bright. And a lesser signing that became very important to Howard was Dallas bringing in Doug Christie, as Howard would learn as much as he could from the veteran defender. And with more offensive responsibility, Howard was responding, with 4 double-doubles and 3 games with at least 25 points over the first month of the season, with the Mavs steamrolling opponents. But then Howard went down with an ankle injury and missed a couple weeks. Yet once he returned, he didn't miss a beat. And neither had the Mavs, as they were 41-11 going into the All-Star break. But just a couple games after that, Howard re-aggravated his ankle and later injured his hamstring, appearing in just 3 games over the next month, but would return for the team's final 10 games. As while Howard played a shortened season, he had acted as the Mavs' 3rd leading scorer, and had done some of his scoring with an improved 3-point stroke, as he shot a career-high 42.9% from deep this season. And the Mavs were among the league's best all year, finishing with a 60-22 record to set up a first-round matchup with Memphis. This wouldn't be much of a challenge, as Memphis was no match for Dallas, with Howard showing consistent improvement throughout the series, culminating in 24 points and 9 rebounds in a Game 4 win to complete the sweep. Round 2 brought their in-state rival San Antonio Spurs, and Howard would again play well as one of Dallas's top scorers and rebounders. But the Spurs weren't the Grizzlies, so this series was much tougher, and the Spurs even took Game 1, but Howard dropped 27 in Game 2 to even it. Then the Mavs won the next 2 to take a commanding 3-1 lead, yet San Antonio would fight back to force a Game 7. And while Howard would foul out of that game, it was after he had contributed an efficient 18 points, and the Mavs would hold on in overtime to advance to another matchup with Nash and the Suns. But Howard just couldn't escape the injuries, as he would again re-aggravate his ankle in Game 1, which forced him out of the game and left his status for the rest of the series as questionable. But the conference finals was no time to let up, so Howard came out in Game 2, played nearly 40 minutes, and tied his postseason career high with 29 points, as the Mavs would even the series, and he followed that up with a 22-point, 12-rebound double-double to help the Mavs take a 2-1 lead. Then with the team splitting the next 2, Dallas went into Phoenix in Game 6 with a chance to punch their ticket to the NBA Finals, and Howard left it all out there, as he finished with 20 points, 15 boards, and 3 steals. And the Mavs finished as the Western Conference champions, with just one more opponent to get through. Overall, the finals series versus Miami wouldn't be Howard's best. He had a poor shooting performance in Game 1, yet played better in Game 2. But regardless, the Mavs had won both games convincingly, as it looked like they were on their way to their first title. But then the Dwayne Wade takeover occurred, with Howard and his bad ankle being on the receiving end of a lot of those Wade points, as he had a lot of trouble trying to slow down a guy who he had been going against since college. And after Miami got their first win in Game 3, Howard shot 1 of 8 in Game 4, as Miami tied it. And then came Game 5. Game 5 had been Howard's best, up until the very end. He had totaled 25 points and 10 rebounds, with a little less than a minute left in overtime, and was at the free throw line with a chance to put Dallas up by 3. But after making all 9 of his free throws up to this point, he missed both. Then fast forward to about 2 seconds left in the game. Dallas was still up by 1, but Wade was at the free throw line, and after tying the game on the first, Howard allegedly called Dallas's last timeout.
Josh Howard, he called timeout. Oh my.
Which Howard would say after the game wasn't the case. But either way, when you look back at it, Avery Johnson was clearly signaling for a timeout. So it's understandable if Howard did what it looked like his coach was asking for. Except Johnson was signaling for the team to call a timeout after the second free throw, so they could advance the ball.
So now they're out of timeout, so if Wade hits the free throw, they can't advance the ball. They have to go the length of the floor.
But with Howard calling it now, Dallas wasn't able to advance after Wade gave Miami the lead, and a half-court prayer from Devin Harris was no good, as Howard would take some heat for his blunder. And while it was a mistake on his part, it was an honest mistake.
It's hard to see what Avery Johnson is arguing about, because if Howard turned to the official and said timeout, they have to call it.
And to be fair, if you're on the road in a hectic arena during the NBA Finals and see your coach signal for timeout, why wouldn't you call it? Then unfortunately for Howard and the Mavs, Miami completed the comeback in Dallas 2 nights later, with Howard's season ending with him averaging about 15.5 points, 6.5 rebounds, and 2 assists per game. Heading into the following season, the Mavs felt confident that as long as they returned their best players and kept working, they'd be right back in the finals. And Howard would definitely be back after signing a 4-year extension, as Dallas looked primed for another run. Howard had his best season to date by far, as the 4th-year swingman just kept improving, upping his scoring to nearly 19 points per game to become the team's best scorer behind Dirk, while also averaging nearly 7 rebounds. And while his 3-point percentage had dropped to a still very respectable 38.5%, it was more because of volume, as he went from attempting about 1 per game last year to nearly 3.5 this year. And with Howard boasting a career-low defensive rating, he had truly become a star and one of the league's best two-way players. But the Mavs fell flat to start the year, losing their first 4 out the gate. But then they remembered who they were, and won 12 straight, and would keep on rolling, entering the All-Star break at 44-9 in the midst of what would become a 17-game win streak, as Howard was a late inclusion on the Western All-Star team as an injury replacement. But depending on who you asked, he should have been voted in outright, not as a replacement. But regardless, Howard was showing every team in the league that they missed out in the 03 draft. Then nothing really changed for Dallas post-All-Star break, as when the regular season came to an end, Dallas had racked up a league best and franchise record 67 wins, and were thinking NBA Finals heading into a first-round matchup with Golden State. But Dallas was going against their old coach, who knew their weaknesses, and a Don Nelson-led Warriors team would force Dirk to play arguably the worst playoff series of his entire career. So someone had to step up, and it would be Howard. Howard would average about 21 points and 10 rebounds on over 51% shooting, as he dropped at least 20 points in every game and recorded 3 double-doubles. And on defense, he averaged over a steal a night. But a small ball Warriors lineup, who often had the 6'8" Steven Jackson covering Dirk, would jump out to a 3-1 lead. Then while Dallas fought them off in Game 5, they succumbed in Game 6, in what is still one of the biggest playoff upsets, as Howard's All-Star season ended with him averaging about 19 points, 7 rebounds, and 2 assists per game. So it had been one of the most disappointing seasons in franchise history. But with both Dirk and Howard in their prime, Dallas's championship window was still very much open. And for the 5th straight season, Howard improved. The forward played one of his healthiest seasons while putting up career highs in scoring, rebounding, and assists, as he would be the Mavs' second leading scorer once again. And a little over a month into the season, he had the best scoring output of his career when he went for 47 points and 10 rebounds in a win over the Jazz, as this was one of 5 games where he dropped at least 30 this season. And while last year Howard was an all-star snub who still found his way to the game, this year he wouldn't be so lucky, as he was again not voted in, and a healthy West squad had no need for an injury replacement. But right after the All-Star break, the Mavs showed that they were serious about winning when they traded to acquire all-star point guard Jason Kidd. The Mavs were 35-18 at the time of the trade, and while they took some time to gel, and Howard struggled with nagging injuries, Dallas would still go 16-13 post-trade to finish at 51-31 and get a first-round matchup with Chris Paul and the New Orleans Hornets. But it was looking like another first-round exit was on the horizon. Howard had struggled immensely over the first 2 games, shooting below 27% from the field, as Dallas had dropped both in New Orleans. Then with the team trying to focus on Game 3 in Dallas, Howard went on to Michael Irvin's radio show earlier in the day and spoke about his marijuana use.
I don't think it's nothing that's hidden. I think about everybody, like in the media world and the sports world, know that NBA players, do smoke marijuana.
Saying that he occasionally smokes during the off-season, but wouldn't smoke during the season, even if the league removed their random drug testing. Ending by saying that he doesn't believe his off-season marijuana use affects his ability to do his job. And while Howard's career arc had made it very clear that his marijuana use had no ill effects on his play, it was weird timing and brought some unexpected and unnecessary scrutiny onto Howard and the Mavs, with Mavs owner Mark Cuban saying they deal with the issue internally. And while Howard again didn't shoot well in Game 3, he did have his highest scoring game of the series to get Dallas their first win. But overall, he just couldn't get his shot to fall, and Dallas was eliminated in 5 games, with Howard's season seeing him average about 20 points, 7 rebounds, and 2 assists per game. But Howard wouldn't receive any suspension, as he hadn't tested positive for anything. He had just talked about his own personal weed use and given his opinion on player marijuana use. However, he definitely had more eyes on him now, and over the offseason, one viral video would change public perception on Josh Howard overnight.
Going on right now. I don't even celebrate that. I'm black, got Obama, all that.
In the early days of YouTube, Howard found himself in hot water after once again stating his opinion. Only this time it was about his country and its president during the singing of the national anthem. And while Howard has publicly acknowledged that Cuban was supportive of him during this time,
Mark Cuban, in those times when I was getting a lot of ridicule, he supported me. You know what I'm saying? And
the media and fans weren't so supportive, as Howard has also said that he received threats on his life after the video surfaced. Even though Howard expressed genuine remorse and accountability soon after, and while this didn't warrant suspension or discipline either, the quiet, hardworking Howard had now become public enemy number one to a lot of people. So Howard was back with the Mavs, but now had a new coach, as Johnson was out and Rick Carlisle was in. And usually the best thing to get fans back on your side after doing something controversial is performing well on the court, and Howard would for the most part. His scoring and rebounding had dropped slightly, but that's expected when adjusting to a new coach and new expectations. And overall, the production dip was marginal, but now Howard was on the hot seat with durability concerns, as his Achilles heel since his college days wasn't actually his heel, it was his ankles, and he would miss extended periods on multiple occasions this season due to ankle problems, with his 52 games being a then career low. But the Mavs still managed 50 wins, and even though Howard wasn't 100%, he was available throughout the playoffs, and even kicked off their first round series against San Antonio with 25 points in a Game 1 win. And aside from a poor Game 2, Howard was great in this series, scoring efficiently on offense and having less to worry about on defense with Manu Ginobili missing the series, as Dallas would wrap it up in 5 games. Round 2 brought Denver, and this time, Howard wasn't going to have it easy on the defensive end, going against one of the league's best scorers in Carmelo Anthony, and it only got more difficult after Howard re-aggravated his ankle in Game 2. And while he would tough it out for the rest of the series, without Howard at 100%, the Mavs defense suffered, and Denver closed out the series in 5 games, as Howard's season came to an end with him averaging about 18 points, 5 rebounds, and 1.5 assists per game. Over the offseason, Howard underwent ankle surgery and would miss the first few games of the year. Then after returning briefly, ankle soreness sidelined him for about a month. And when he was playing, he couldn't move or cut like he once did. And with the Mavs having acquired Sean Marion during the offseason, Howard would lose his spot in the starting lineup, as he would see a big drop in both his production and efficiency over his first 31 games. And he had also reportedly been clashing with Carlisle since Carlisle's arrival last year, with some reports saying that Howard was becoming a problematic player for the Mavs. But with a contract that was set to expire after the season, he had trade value to the right team. And that right team was the rebuilding Washington Wizards, who would trade for Howard in mid-February, but they would get less than 100 total minutes out of the forward, as in his 4th game in a Wizards uniform, he tore his ACL, as his season ended with him averaging about 12.5 points, 3.5 rebounds, and 1.5 assists per game. So while the Wizards declined his team option, they would work out a new 1-year deal with Howard to bring him back for the 2011 season. However, he didn't make his return until mid-December, and while he could still give some solid minutes, he was no longer the player that he once was. And now chronic issues were taking over his career, as after returning to a 6-18 Wizards team, further knee soreness limited him to just 18 appearances all season, as the Wizards finished at 23-59, and Howard finished the year with averages of about 8.5 points, 4 rebounds, and 1.5 assists per game. This time the Wizards didn't bring Howard back, but he would sign on with the Jazz for the lockout-shortened season, and would manage 43 games as a solid contributor off the bench. But he would miss the majority of the second half of the season, as he had surgery to repair loose cartilage in his knee, and was only 2 games into a return from a nearly 20-game absence when the Jazz prepared to take on the Spurs in the first round of the playoffs. And while Howard would have a 10-point game too, that covered the majority of his scoring in this series. However, while it was in small doses, he was doing a bit of everything when he was on the court. But the Jazz were completely overmatched, with the Spurs running through them in a 4-game sweep, as Howard's year in Utah had seen him average about 8.5 points, 3.5 rebounds, and an assist per game. But Howard was once again a free agent, and remained a free agent when the following season began, until he was signed by the T-Wolves in mid-November, and appeared in 11 games for the team. But in the end, Howard's body continued to fail him, as less than a month into his T-Wolves tenure, he tore his ACL again, and was released soon after, as his 11 games saw him average about 6.5 points, 3.5 rebounds, and half an assist per game. Howard would attempt to come back the following season, and would even spend time with the Austin Toros of the D-League until hernia surgery would end his year once again, as this would mark the end of Josh Howard's basketball career. But luckily, he's found new meaning in recent years, beginning a new career as a coach, which isn't all that surprising, coming from a guy who chose coaching kids at his youth camp over a possible spot on Team USA years earlier. Josh Howard came and went quickly. First, he was undervalued and overshadowed by a legendary draft class, then quietly played his role as a Swiss Army knife on a Dallas Mavericks team led by one of the league's biggest stars. His improvement was slow but consistent, yet underappreciated by many. The mid-2000s Dallas Mavericks wouldn't have been the same team without Howard, and they really got one of the biggest draft steals in recent memory. It's just a shame their partnership had to end how it did. Many years of great play from Howard was overshadowed by the controversy and coaching clashes during the end of his time in Dallas. But the biggest reason why Josh Howard has become so underappreciated is because he only had about 5 good years in the league before injuries completely wiped out the second half of his career. But those first 5 years of Josh Howard showed the league what it meant to be a complete player. But that's it for today's episode on Josh Howard. Hope you enjoyed it, and make sure to subscribe for more videos like this one. If you liked it, check out this one on one of his Mavs teammates, or this one on another Wake Forest alum. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.